Hello everyone, welcome back. I haven't made a video in a very long time, and I've made some updates as well. And for today, I'm going to be sharing a popular but yet not so popular opening, which comes from one of the biggest lines in chess, basically. And it is a very specialized line, and if you are a French player, and you should probably know this line by now. And if you don't, or you're just starting to learn how to play this line, then it would be a perfect time for me to introduce this line to you. So firstly, white starts off with e4, e6. So this is a line for black for the French defense. And after d4, d5, knight c3, knight f6. Here, after bishop g5, the line that I'll be recommending today is to move bishop b4 for black. Now, this line is known as the MacCutcheon Variation, and it's actually quite popular, but a lot of people don't understand just how good this line is. So, firstly, a lot more commonly played in these days is bishop b4, but I know the bishop b4 line to be slightly worse for black than the MacCutcheon Variation, and although it doesn't appear that way, it's just the true fact. Alright, but firstly, let's talk about the Winawer. In this position, white has a few moves that he can play, but in my opinion, the best move in this position is to play the move knight g2. It's called the orthodox variation, and I won't be going into much details in this line. I might do it someday, but not this time. And the main reason is because in the orthodox variation, or otherwise known as the Alekhine-Morakhzy gambit, this position basically refutes the Winawer bishop on b4. And this is the main reason why I'm not afraid of playing against the Winawer as white anymore. So, in this position, I won't be going into it that much, but I'm just going to say that after the move knight f6 and the move bishop g5, when these are played, this is known as the classical variation. And after this, black usually plays the move bishop e7. But after bishop e7, e5, knight fd7, bishop takes, queen takes, and f4. This, in my opinion, is just a bit better for white because white has the space advantage and black's best dark squared bishop is already gone. Instead, after bishop e7, back here, the move bishop b4 looks very counterintuitive at first sight because it looks like the move e5, which is the best move for white, it looks like that black's knight is just gone for free. And it is technically, unless you count h6 and a counter threat, which happens. Now this is a very common way to escape the pin. And it looks at first sight that after e takes f6, h takes g5, f takes g7, rook g8, white must be better here. In fact, white is slightly better, but black is much easier to play. And here's why. Firstly, black's going to take this g7 pawn, so the pawns are going to be even. Black has one gigantic pawn island, while white is split into two. Now, the pawn island won't be the biggest issue, but the biggest issue for white that's going to arise later on is that the c3 knight will be taken by this bishop, and then white's going to have doubled c-pawns. And then black's going to try to castle queen side, and the king side is where black is strongest now, because there's no h-pawn, so the h-file is completely clean. And just to show what you mean, here is one sample line that could go, and in this line, I'm going to be playing natural moves for white, but you will see how black will be playing extremely well. After bishop d3, here the move queen f6 can be played. And after a3, bishop takes c3, b takes c3, knight c6. If you don't play a3, then the bishop will always just keep an eye out on c3, and that's going to be bad because the d4 pawn will be hanging. And after rook b1, queen g7, queen f3, b6, bishop b5, bishop b7, black's just planning to long castle. And that's again, white's just playing all these normal development moves. After knight e2, long castles, in this position, black is just better. this bishop is going to be active. This bishop is very bad. The knight will come to a5, pawn goes to c5, pawn goes to g4. This h file is just open. Black's just better here. And after something like castles, king b8, bishop c6, bishop c6. And here, something like h3 can just be met by f5. And here, black is on the attack. This bishop can always retreat, and black can play c5. White's queen side is weak. White's king side is weak. And basically, black's just almost winning in this position, actually. So that is the power of the MacCutcheon variation. There are a few sidelines, and I'll cover them from the very beginning. Firstly, here white also has the choice of playing e takes e5. And this is, well, it used to be one of the ways that I played, and realized there was some better move. But after e takes d5, in this position after knight f3, castles, bishop e2, the bishop on g5 is on an awkward position because there's no bishop on d6 yet. The bishop is on b4. And something like h6, if you play bishop f4 in this position, then all of a sudden the move knight e4 comes. And you can see that this bishop on b4 is doing a very good job. So instead, in this position, this is why the move bishop takes f6 is played. After queen takes f6, the d5 pawn is not hanging. And after a3 takes, in this position, white doesn't even have the bishop pair advantage, and white just has these doubled c pawns, and black is slightly better. Which is why, in this position, the practically only good move in this position here is to play knight e2. Now, this move transposes back into the line I talked about earlier against the Winawer, which is why I played this line all of a sudden. Because after knight f6, in this position, white can take advantage with e5. But before I get into any detail, in this position, this after knight e2, in this position, playing the bishop to g5 is just a slightly worse version of this. After d takes e4, a3, bishop e7, and here bishop f6. And after knight e4, in this position, a d4 pawn is under threat, and white is slightly better in this position, but it's no more than slightly better. Which is why in this position, after e5, which should be the best move, h6, this is where most of the deviations come in, and also why e takes f6 may not be the best move. There are two other main lines in this position, bishop h4 and bishop d2. Bishop d2 is a slightly worse one. And after bishop c3, beat c3, knight e4, queen g4, attacking g7, just simply king f8. In this position, black's going to have a very solid king side because these pawns are going to be broken up, and c5, knight c6, b6, bishop b7 is coming. And black's going to do most of his development on the queen side, and the king side of black is extremely sturdy with the rook on h8 and these pawns over here. And this is also why in this position, after queen f4, if black just plays c5 in this position, then black's going to have a much better position. Well, not much better, but a very decent position. And in this position, instead of playing bishop d2 in this position, white could also play the move bishop h4. But after bishop h4, now g5 can be played. And now, in this position, bishop g3, which is usually played and it's the only good move. Here, after knight e4, white can meet up with knight e2 again. But in this position, after c5, a3, bishop c3, knight c3, knight c3, bc3, white is barely better here. You can just say that black is equalized in this position. Nevertheless, this is a perfectly good option for white to play here. And after knight c6, queen d2, queen a5, rook d1, bishop d7. This position is not bad for black or white whatsoever. It's about equal. But e takes f6 is what brings things to the sharp edge. And after h takes g5, f takes g7, rook g8, we come back to this position. And here white needs to play precise. Just the natural move bishop d3 is all white needs to give black the advantage. Here white should take advantage of this move with the move h4. And because of the move h4, this is why this line hasn't become the main line yet. The move h4 is extremely powerful because after the move g takes h4, all of a sudden, here a white plays queen g4, protects g7 for a time being, and attacks h4. And after the move knight c6, queen takes h4, queen takes, rook takes, rook takes. In this position, after knight f3, the bishop on c8 becomes a really bad piece, especially in this endgame, which is why this line could be considered a refutation here for white. And h4 is obviously the best move, but most of your opponents will not know about this move because it looks very suicidal. White hasn't developed any of his kingside pieces and pushes his h-pawn. That's just very counterintuitive. Yet h4 is the best move and gives white an advantage. If your opponent does not know about h4, you're completely fine here as black and you're most likely going to be better. And after bishop d3, we've covered this. The move queen f6 is a very common move in these lines, attacking g7, g4, and protecting this pawn over here. And the main reason why this line is so good is because white never gets his e5 pawn back. And because of the weakness on e5, c3 becomes vulnerable, c5 attacking d4 becomes more vulnerable, and all of a sudden white's position will start falling apart. And black also has the meanwhile bishop pair, although we could say that it's not really a bishop pair because the light square bishop is absolutely horrible in this line, like in all French lines. But as you can see here, black still has many chances. And in fact, another approach for this line is after a3, bishop takes, pawn takes. Here you could play the move b6 as white, and as black. And although this line isn't that good, you can always just try playing bishop a6 later on. But this is not the best idea. The best idea is just to leave this bishop here at home and just hope for the best by fianchettoing it. And it's just a lot of other crazy lines. So let's go back to the start of the MacCutcheon variation. So that was a very brief summary, but it covers up what black tries to get in the advantage in this type of position. With bishop b4, it's the MacCutcheon variation, in my eyes, would be a delayed but improved Winawer variation. In the Winawer, the bishop on c1 doesn't want to come to g5. It usually wants to come to a3 after the knight on c3 is taken. And after bishop b4, because the e5 tricks don't work in this position, in fact, this position might just be a much better Winawer. And although in this position, black cannot castle kingside, the queen side is so solid. Just look at all these pawns protecting the king if the king was on c8. Like, you could just imagine that. And if the bishop takes on c3, and then these pawns become doubled, then it's also another story. And finally, one more very small line is queen d3, protecting this knight, but here you just simply take the pawn. After long castles, which is what white should do in these types of positions, knight c6, and after a3, bishop e7, and after, whoops, my bad, after knight f3, here you can play the move a6, and after king b1, you can just play something like queen d6, bishop d7, long castles, and it's going to be a very quiet game, but black's most likely going to have the advantage due to his better pawn structure, and a very typical idea in any type of French defense. So I'm not going to be playing the best moves, but I just want to show you the plan. After bishop e2, bishop d7, rook dg1, I'm just playing random moves, long castles, h3, here f6 is a very common move. After king a2, I'm not playing the best moves for white whatsoever. Bishop e8, followed by bringing the bishop to g6 and entering this diagonal, is a very common idea in all types of French defense positions. Playing f6 and playing bishop c8 to d7 to e8 to g6 or h5, it depends. But in these types of positions, when this bishop becomes active, black's just pretty much winning. And that means that it's something that white does not want to face. So in conclusion, the MacCutcheon variation after bishop b4 is a delayed but improved Winawer. And if your opponent plays the classical variation of the French defense, because most of you would play knight f6 in this position, it's still a more common move than bishop b4. But if you are a bishop b4 player, then playing knight f6 is even better if you know your opponent's going to play bishop g5. Bishop b4 keeps that same Winawer flavor, but it also adds in that white's bishop is misplaced on g5. And that the move e5 does not work tactically, as I have proved before. So I hope that that's a new repertoire for you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.